Putin claims that the West wants Russians to kill each other. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday accused Ukraine and its Western allies of wanting Russians to kill each other in an attack by militants affiliated with the Wagner Group, which surprised the country with the holiday ban in Moscow. In his first speech to the country after the withdrawal of the retreat, Putin paid tribute to the pilots killed in the revolt and confirmed for the first time that Russian pilots were killed in combat, while Wagner's mercenaries were on their way to Moscow. He is said to have given orders to stop the bloodshed and issue amnesty to the Wagnerian rebels, whose resistance has caused the greatest challenge to horse rights. Putin said on the radio that, "From the very beginning of the situation I decided not to spill much blood, and thanked the Russian people for their compassion. The enemies of Russia want to kill the brothers, the neo-Nazis in Kiev and the peoples of the West, and many traitors. They want Russian soldiers to kill each other," Putin said. Putin also thanked the security guards for their work during the military attack, including Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, who was the main target of the attack. Civilians. Tribute. Putin's words to the downed pilot. Confirms the news on social media that Wagner's forces shot down a Russian plane in the war. There is still no official information on how many pilots were killed or how many planes were shot down. Several Russian networks, including the Rybar blog, which has over 1 million users, tracked the Russian military and reported on Saturday that perhaps 13 Russian pilots were killed during takeoff one day. According to Rybar, the downed aircraft consisted of 3 Mi-8 MTPR electronic warfare helicopters and an Il-18 aircraft and its crew. It is not clear under what circumstances the plane was shot down and the pilot was killed. During the offensive, measures were taken according to my direct instructions to prevent bloodshed, said Putin. Wagner's army landed, and Prigozhin agreed to go into exile in Belarus, which would soon end. Likewise, those who commit crimes should be given time to come to their senses and realize that their actions are rejected by society and that these amusements are a tragedy and disaster for Russia and our country, Putin said. Aforementioned Wagnerian leader Yevgeny Prigozhin also posted an 11-minute message on the news service's Telegram channel that shed little light on his whereabouts or his agreement to halt the Moscow march. Advancing about 800 kilometers, 500 miles, south from the city, his men had to shoot down an attacking helicopter before they could stop the attack. Many Western leaders believe the conflict has exposed Putin's vulnerability following his decision to invade Ukraine 16 months ago. The choice of Wagner's fighters. The Russian Prime Minister said at the weekend that he will comply with the agreement that allows Wagner's fighters to move to Belarus or return to their families by signing an agreement with the Russian Ministry of Defense. Today you can continue to work in Russia or return to your family and neighbors by signing an agreement with the Ministry of Defense or other police services. Everyone can go to Belarus, Putin said. Address. Putin thanked Wagner's warriors and leaders for fighting to avoid wars, and said the majority of Wagner members were sympathizers. He did not mention Prigozhin. Putin met with heads of Russia's security services, including Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, on Monday night, IFX reported, citing a Kremlin spokesperson. One of Prigozhin's main demands is the dismissal of Shoigu, Russia's supreme leader, who has not been seen by the people since Monday night since the revolution. Prigozhin, 62, a former ally of Putin's and a former prisoner whose soldiers fought in the war in Ukraine, protested this month against the order to place his army under the command of the Ministry of Defense. Prigozhin had previously defended his withdrawal, saying it was to save the mercenary organization and expose Russia's military leader's failure to attack the Kremlin. Prigozhin, who did not disclose where he spoke, said in an online message that his attack was to prevent the division of Wagner's forces and boasted of the ease with which Wagner's forces went to Moscow, voicing serious security concerns. "We went to the opposition, not to overthrow the government in the country," said Prigozhin. He boasted that his men had assembled all the military infrastructure less than 200 kilometers, 125 miles, from the Moscow, including the airbase along the way. After the mediation of Alexander Lukashenko, Prigozhin stopped the attack and retreated. His men from the military base were in the southern city of Rostov-on-Don, the nerve center of the Ukrainian war. Prigozhin was last seen smiling and high-fiving the back of an SUV on Saturday night in. His fighters said, "Already fought to avoid bloodshed." On Saturday, Prigozhin said that he will go to Belarus in accordance with the agreement of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Lukashenko said in a speech Monday that he ordered Wagner to work according to the law, without going into details. The White House said it could not confirm that President Wagner was in Belarus. The three major Russian news agencies reported on Monday that the criminal case against Prigozhin was not closed with a clear reversal of immunity, which was made public in an attempt to persuade Prigozhin to leave. Wagner's St. Petersburg said the company remained open, and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the company would continue to operate in Mali and the Central African Republic. Emergency security measures put in place to protect the capital from attacks by authorities in Moscow and the counter-terrorism that has lifted the Voronezh district south of the city. None of this. U.S. President Joe Biden, in his words before his speech in Washington, said the change was part of the Russian offensive. He said he had discussed this issue in talks with key allies and agreed that it was important that Putin not be allowed to blame the West or NATO. Biden said, "We have made it clear that we are not involved. We have nothing to do with it." White House Homeland Security Secretary John Kirby said that U.S. policy does not want to replace the Russian government. The U.S. State Department said that Lynn Tracy, ambassador to Moscow, urged Russian officials to reiterate what we have said publicly. This is a Russian internal matter with which the United States does not and will not participate. Foreign governments, even friendly ones. For Russia or hypocrisy, both vying for answers on what happened behind the scenes and what will happen next. EU Foreign Minister Josep Borrell told reporters in Luxembourg, "The political system seems weak and the army is disappearing." In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky said that in the first week the army was advancing in all areas of the front, calling it a happy day in a video address on the train after visiting the front line last night. Clashes continue in Ukraine. Kyiv forces declare a new victory in the battle to expel Russian forces from the east and south of the country, but the authorities take more security measures in the city of Russia. Zelensky paid a morale visit to the Russian military forces near the town of Bakhmut, where some of the heaviest fighting in the conflict took place, and spoke about his military service. In his speech on Monday evening, Zelensky said, "Today is a happy day when our army is advancing in all areas." Military commanders said their forces had gained ground in the south and east of the country. "We are hitting the enemy from their positions on the side of the city of Bakhmut," said Oleksandr Syrsky, commander of the Eastern Land Forces. He has returned from the Ukrainian soil. "We are moving forward." Residents of the front town of Drushkivka in Donetsk, also near Bakhmut, told AFP that 4 explosions at night destroyed residential areas. Lyubov, 66, said, pointing to the new hole in the roofing concrete, "It's a fun night, we don't have long, it was quiet. It's been about a month."